Uh, I am an activist. I have been now for about 10 years or so. And what I do is I help to advocate for Indigenous rights. And this includes environmental issues, the murder of missing Indigenous women, the Every Child Matters, which is now a very, very big issue amongst Indigenous people. For those of you who are not aware, the hashtag Every Child Matters issue for Indigenous people has to do with the residential schools all across North America. There were schools that began in the 1800s or so, the 1800s, and the armed forces would come into Indigenous villages, kidnap the children, and separate them from their families, and take them to these schools. At the schools, they were tortured, and they were subject to a lot of bad things and a lot of heinous crimes. And many of them never made it home and were buried at the schools. Many in unmarked graves, many nobody is even aware of. And so what is happening in the contemporary era, what's happening right now, is that activists like myself and others who are much, much more dedicated to this cause, they are starting to appeal to the governments of both the United States and also the Canadian government. Mostly the Canadians are the more helpful than the Americans. And they're starting to discover the children and to take them home to be interned with traditional protocols. This is a process that's called repatriation, and it is protected under different federal laws, including NAGPRA, which is the Native Americans Grave Protection Act. I believe that's what it stands for. If not, I'll try to correct it. Anywho, I would like to I guess I feel like I can't get in front of a camera without talking about at least one Indigenous issue. So that's gonna be today's issue: repatriation of Indigenous children. For the Indigenous people alive today, and think of this as an effort to give respect and honor to one's great grandparents, because of the torture happened all the way up until the end. And some of these schools are not closed. Some of these schools are still open today. So we need to stop acting like this was something that happened a long, long time ago. That's not the truth of it at all. And thus far, about 7,000 children have been found. The bodies of 7,000 children have been found. Actually, it's closer to 6,500 or so in my best recollection. And this is a portion, a fraction of the larger genocide. And one of the things that I've been talking about lately is that the genocide has no name. What do you call what happened to my people? I recently started a TikTok and I asked there, what do you call what happened to my people? And not very many people had an answer. And so let me say this. What you respect has a name. So, and who you love has a name. So if you have, the name of the people that you love in your life, they have a name, and you know their name, and you call them by their name. You don't give them, mean nicknames. You don't say bad things about them. You love them. You pay attention to them. You give them the honor of a proper noun. With this situation, there is no honor, and there is no proper noun. Because to give what happened to my people a name is to acknowledge that what happened to my people indeed happened. If you ever look, there are so many situations or circumstances where you can tell that the truth about the genocide has been covered up again and again and again. And, there are so many horrible things that come with genocide, and a part of that is historical trauma. And historical trauma doesn't really ever leave you. Never. It doesn't leave you. It's just always there. The only thing that can be done is to turn historical trauma into current contemporary honor. And what I mean by that is, yes, what happened to my great-grandmother was horrible, traumatizing. It was my great-grandmother who was in one of those schools. That's the truth of it. I'm a descendant of somebody who survived that. And she did lose relatives. And so she would be upset. She missed them. Many of us grew up giving honor in ceremony, giving respect spiritually, of, in different ways, like in our cultural ways. Like there are some tribes that have feast day, so you have a plate, a spirit plate, and it's for the people who have passed. And sometimes there would be a little kid's plate nobody ever talked about, and chances are that little kid's plate is meant for somebody who passed in the school. We would have things like that. We would have ceremonies where we would have offerings, and there was just this anonymous, little kid something, a little boy, little girl, a little doll, a little outfit for a little kid. Nobody ever explained. Nobody ever said, because nobody ever had to. It was a child who went. And the thing is that they're still there. And also what has happened in many of these spaces is that, in Phoenix, I want to talk about Phoenix, where I'm from. There's the Phoenix Indian Boarding School Park, the Steel Indian School Park, that's what it's called. And it's beautiful, lovely, lovely, lovely space. And you can go there and learn all about how the park used to be a school for Native students, and how it was a space where culture was loved, and how it was a place of vocational training, and all of these happy thoughts, good feelings. And that's not the truth at all. The truth is that it was our Auschwitz, and now it's their park. And that can be, that is historical trauma. That doesn't leave you. And the attitudes about how people feel about the things that have traumatized you historically, that's a part of the contemporary, what I want to call the contemporary harm. That's what hurts today. What hurts today is what happened back then to my relatives, yes, but what also hurts today is other people's attitudes about what had happened, and other people's attitudes about how I'm processing it. Because from what I can tell, my generation is the first generation who's ever been able to slow down and stop and think and breathe and actually process what had happened. Everybody else had to keep their nose to the grinding stone and work and sustain life and to earn a living. It was too intense. And so now finally the people are starting to process what had happened back then. And the attitudes that you see from other people, telling you to stop it, shut up, go away, sit down. What happened back then was worse than what's happening now. Who are you to say something, what's a little colonization in the morning or whatever, that's kind of the way historical trauma goes. somebody has to finally process it, think it through, live it through, and then let it go. And then you can start anew. And in many ways, that's what's happening here.